Welcome. My name is Jason Henderson. This is the Summer Lovin launch party. This is our virtual launch party for Castle of Horror Anthology Volume 3. In case you are wondering, Castle of Horror Anthology is a series produced by the Castle Bridge Media organization that is founded by myself and Incher Yo, my co-publisher, who I'll have talk to you in a sec. And we can have Incher go into all of the work that goes into the covers as well, because he is actually the man who has given a look and feel and design to all of the books that we've done in the anthology series. This one's the third one. We started last year. We had the one that came in the spring, and then one that came at Christmas time. And let me find this. And the new one, of course, is Volume 3, which is our, I'm sorry, I'm trying to find there we go, which is Summer Lovin. And by the way, so Incher, of course, designed this particular cover as well. And Incher, as soon as I throw to you, you can explain how this came together. Tricia, who is also on the call, who is a very prolific writer, did one of our ads as well, and she took an image that I think is like the Santa Monica Pier and turned it super spooky as well, and that was super awesome. So that's it. I just wanted to introduce all of you. This is an interesting experiment, doing a launch party via Zoom, but I'm just super excited, and I'm very honored to have had a chance to edit all of these writers, and I really wanted to get a chance to hear from them all. So I'm a co-publisher, and I'm going to pass it off to my co-publisher, Incher Yo in Seattle. Hello, Incher.
Hello, Jason. So as Jason said, I'm a co-founder and publisher of Castle Bridge Media. My background is mostly in magazine publishing, and I've been doing that for many, many, many years. And Jason and I have known each other since elementary school.
Yeah, that's true.
So, yeah. So when he came to me with an idea of putting a publishing house together, I thought it's right up both of our alleys. You know, he's a great writer and editor, and I love to do design work. So it's kind of a match made in heaven, so to speak. So we started it last year. Actually, the fall last year, right? With Volume 1. And I guess we can announce now, right, what we've got planned for Volume 1. We have a special announcement. In celebration of the release of Volume 3, we're excited to offer Volume 1 for free on Kindle starting tomorrow. That's Tuesday, June 23rd through Wednesday, June 24th. So that's a great opportunity for any of you who haven't had a chance to purchase one of our previous volumes to go back and check it out. And it's got a fantastic collection for short stories from some really great and amazing writers, some of which are here with us today.
Oh, here it is. Here's the cover, actually.
Yeah.
Of Volume 1. Yeah. Yes. I interrupted.
So, should we talk about our stories in Volume 3?
Well, actually, you know what? Yes. Why don't you? So yeah, you acted as designer and editor, but just like everybody else, you're one of the writers. So what was it? Yours was called The Rising. So what did you
Rising. It's about a 100-year flood that traps a young college student in a vacation rental cabin by himself. And as the flood expands and destroys everything it covers, there's something dark and sinister, deep, dangerous floodwaters that comes bubbling up from the surface. So I don't want to spoil too much, but that's what my story's about.
Very cool. And by the way, I don't know if one thing you guys might not know, putting together an anthology, what I'll do is I'll lay out everything in a spreadsheet, and it'll say author, title, and I'm not making this up. It'll go notes, and then I'll have ranking by level of funniness. Basically, I find level of funniness is the easiest way to organize a horror collection, because with 1 being the most funny and 10 being the least funny, in other words, the most dark, you want in a horror collection to like mix it up. So
is there like a matrix of funniness? Yeah, where does Lovecraft end up on that matrix?
Whoops! It looks like Jason. Oh no, there we go.
There he is.
Yeah,
There's a Venn diagram.
Are you the sole decider, or is there like a panel of humor judges?
I'm the voice of God.
God.
Well, at least in your own sanctorum there.
Yeah. 10 by 10 sanctorum.
Charlie McCarthy and I make all these decisions ourselves. So
I think Wolle should be part of that decision-making process.
Yes. So right. I will in the future we'll take it to Joya. But my point is that turns out to be quite useful because you go that seems to be the magic way to organize level of darkness in a horror story is to say, is it funny? And like Clive Barker, never funny. And so you know, he would get a 10. So yes. All right. Thank you very, very much, Insure. So Mr. Nisbet, I know, hasn't been able to join us because he's in Scotland. Although we did show up briefly as the #1 British horror anthology, thanks to the help of Mr. Nisbet. His story is called Angel Bay, and it is one of the freakiest giant wasp stories I've ever read. So I was.
But is it funny?
It rated a solid 10. There was no laughs. I
am here.
You're here.
He is here.
Oh my gosh, you're Rob's iPad. I did not know this. Okay, well, I just screwed up your storytelling. I didn't know that. I'm sorry, Rob. Is there anything else that you would say after I said that you're not funny and also that this game?
I don't know if you can see me at all.
I'm sorry?
I don't know if you can see me.
We cannot see you, no.
Oh, that's probably a benefit. So that's. I don't know what else to say. I just started writing a horror story of some sort, and I was thinking about summer.
Yeah.
And everything I could think of about summer wasn't very horrific. It was all sort of sunshine, barbecues, things like that. And then I thought of wasps.
Yeah.
So that sent me researching into the life cycle of a wasp, and I had that on my desk for ages. And then the story just came to me. I had this artist in Scotland and involved with these giant wasps, and that's how it happened.
After we get through this, I'd kind of like to ask you when we get a chance, what made you decide to set that story in the 60s? But I will hold that for now because I want to move through. But I'm so glad that you could make it, and I'm sorry I didn't recognize Rob's iPad. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine.
All right, Monsieur Bowles, hello.
Hey.
So yours is actually also in a very particular place, which it is the Boo Hag. So tell me about that.
Right. So hold on. I'm unmuted, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, God. The other day I was like going on and on in a panel that was being recorded for San Diego Comic-Con, and I had unmuted myself on the screen, but like left myself muted on the headset. That was
yeah.
So you know, I'm from South Texas, from a Mexican-American family, but my dad was in the Navy, and so we spent several years living in the low country of South Carolina on these little islands, little coastal islands. And there's this great culture there, the Gullah culture. We lived mainly in African-American neighborhoods. And one of my best friends, Kevin, used to take me to his grandmother's house, and she would tell us these incredible stories of, you know, legendary creatures from that area. And the one that like stuck with me forever was the Boo Hag, which is this figure that doesn't have skin and that steals human skin and like wears it, but it doesn't fit well. It's like all kind of loose and weird. And the different stories that I heard from this old Gullah woman like really like stuck with me. And over time, I began writing a cycle of stories that are set in the South Carolinian Low Country that feature a character that is known as Dr. Crow. He's like a root worker, like a shaman kind of guy, and who has a little herbal shop and takes on clients from time to time to do things. And so in this story, a client comes in who's being haunted by a Boo Hag. She's coming around and and she looks like his ex, who he claims has left him. And so this guy hires this very gaunt and scary looking root worker, Dr. Crow, to help him get rid of the haint, which is what people in the Low Country call these kinds of creatures, haints.
Wow.
And he gets more than he bargains for, because Dr. Crow, while he's all about that monster fighting scene, is also all about justice. And when he discovers what's really going on in this guy's house and where this Buhag actually comes from, which obviously I can't reveal, you need to read the story to find out.
Yeah.
His client gets a lot more than he bargained for, a lot more than he paid for. Let's just say that. So it was a lot of fun just trying to set a story in the summer, in that humid, oppressive summer that's a lot like Houston or the Rio Grande Valley where I live, and also make it scary, because there is, even in those dark nights that are humid and sweltering, full of fireflies, there's still plenty of opportunities for horrifying things to happen. So it's all about how you play it out.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, David. And by the way, I've known David for so many years, and he was just mocking me the other day that I say exactly the same phrases over and over again, that once you've listened to me talk for about 1,000 hours, you'll find the same stuff. And thank you very much. It's probably one of those things.
I've heard every single one of the 306 episodes of your podcast. So I've heard you talk for thousands of hours now. So
Jesus Christ. Okay. So thank you. Bonnie Jo Stufflebeam. Do I call you Bonnie Jo or Bonnie?
You can call me Bonnie.
Okay. So your story is really wild, and it was called The Ghost Town, and I know you had written it a number of years earlier, but could you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, so it's kind of got this mythological feel. It's about this town that's hemmed in by the river Styx, and so all of the people who are stuck inside the town, they can't leave. It's kind of got a small town feel. Except they're actually literally trapped. And the only way that they're going to get out is by dying. But in order to cross the river, you have to have a body that hasn't been mutilated in any way. And so because some of the people within the town, died more violent deaths, it's created this kind of body trade. There are body snatchers who are constantly looking for people who have just died.
Well, unless you like them.
Their body. And so it's about this woman named Ray, whose wife, her spirit is still hanging around because her body got snatched. And so she's trying to find a body for her wife's spirit to enter so she can finally be free of the grief of losing her wife.
It's such an extremely eerie and poetic and symbolic story. It's one of those ones that is clearly just in another world from our own. I thought that was really wild. Thank you.
And
it's
not funny.
No, it ranked very low in funniness. It was so yeah. The Venn diagram. Yes. All right, and actually one of the ones that ranked slightly more funny, but not by much. Mainly because we suddenly found ourselves in the middle of quarantine, is Ms. Hoover. Tricia, you wrote this one under PJ Hoover. So tell me a little about deterioration.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering where I hit on the funny scale. I don't know.
Well, you have some clever turns of phrase. So I can't find your ranking, but you weren't Clive Barker humorless.
Okay, well that's good to know. I like to slip in a little bit of humor. Yeah, I realized that, I think I had this thing about memory, because the first short story I wrote for the first anthology was all about like memory harvesting. Yes. And then this one turned out to be about memory too. And so, I think I was kind of inspired. The story's called Deterioration, and it's really about this virus that kind of eats away at people's memories. And it gets worse when it's hot and worse in the summer and things like that. And it's funny though, because as I was thinking about it, we all think about story ideas and stuff like that. And I was brainstorming with my kids, who are wonderful to brainstorm ideas with. And I was like, but there has to be more to the story. It just can't be this pandemic story, right? Because that's a little too real. No, anyway, so one thing I love is Black Mirror, and Black Mirror has really kind of just like opened my eyes to the wonder of horror and what horror can mean in so many different aspects. And there's so many episodes that I just absolutely love of Black Mirror, and I love the whole idea of them being able to back up memories, and put them in like memory banks and things like that. It's just like this cool thing. Like, I don't know if it's ever going to really happen in real life, but it's so fun to play around with in so many different ways, whether you're writing a middle grade novel or an adult horror short story. And so I kind of took that idea of like this, if people's memories were being deteriorated by this virus, like while they're waiting for their vaccine, they can back up their memories. So maybe when the vaccine comes, the memories can then be reimplanted into their heads, and they can hopefully be the same person they were before that. So, but as hopefully all good stories go, nothing ever works out like it should. And hopefully you guys will all be surprised when you get to the end of the story.
What I loved about this one was all of the stuff that I just couldn't believe was actually happening, like people judging one another for how well they wore their face masks and whether they were following the rules when they took the mask down to eat and stuff like that. And it just suddenly.
Oh, did I lose you guys?
No, I think Jason just froze.
Oh, did he? Okay. I was like, wait, was it me or was it him? I couldn't tell.
That was actually happening in the world around us. So that
it was fun. Yeah, maybe that was some of the humor. It's her on the bus, like being like, "Oh my God, that guy can't even put his face mask on."
Yes. I don't think Joe is with us unless I've missed her, and that's okay. That's cool. Joe Whittemore posted the funniest picture today of her with the paperback version of the book. So I thought that was really neat. She's like on a beach with the Castle of Horror Volume 3. Ms. Hieber, hello. We've talked 1,000 times, but and it's so Myth Interrogated. I can't remember if you had actually published this one before or not, but tell me about Myth Interrogated.
So this little story is actually one of the first short stories that I ever wrote, and I put it aside for years because it's dealing with an aspect of Greek mythology that I ended up using in my debut novel. So in 2009, when Strangely Beautiful came out, visual aid here, this is the revised edition with Tor. So excellent. This is historical fantasy, and it's set in the Victorian era with Greek mythology bleeding literally onto the streets of London in 1888 at the time of Jack the Ripper. In Myth Interrogated, I'm dealing with Greek mythology, but in a very, very different way. But I'm still using some of the same gods. So I didn't want confusion of this very different portrayal of the underworld and its favorite denizens than I did in Strangely Beautiful. So I basically had shelved it for such a long time because I didn't want there to be this confusion of this much, frankly, darker take on a certain queen of the underworld and her paramour than I have in Strangely Beautiful. And I take great liberties in both cases, but I was particularly fascinated with the idea that in Greek mythology you have a definite merging of dreams and the underworld. And so that made me sort of also think of the way that Neil Gaiman and the Sandman and the Dream King and all these various other things of these mythic tropes have filtered into our consciousness about what we think about the gods and their purview and how that's kind of blended through time. And so I have a young woman who is out in the sunlight in her sundress, and she finds her favorite goddess and she has to ask her questions. And in the piece, of course, much like has been said, she gets a little more than she bargained for, realizing that, maybe don't always meet your heroes. Let's put it that way. So
it reminded me a lot of like Interview with the Vampire, only it was it was an interview with a goddess, and
highly influential Interview with the Vampire for me. So yeah, definitely most of my work is an exploration of trope, and I really like asking sort of in my books, I like to ask trope questions. So I kind of made that literal in this case.
Lovely. Well, thank you very, very much. Mr. Peel, do we have John? Is John on? I don't know, and if not, that's okay. But now I'm paranoid because I missed Rob earlier, so that's okay. All right, but I know we got Michael Aronovitz. Michael, where are you? Are you here? I know he was here.
No.
Oh yeah, there you are. Hey, my friend. So all right, yours is called The Echo. Tell me what's up.
Well, a couple of things. First of all, I started the Bookman, and I read the first few chapters. I left it off where you have the fire going in the sporting goods store, and then a guy bites into a book that's part human and the whole 9 yards. I'm really enjoying it. Thank you for letting me know about that book, Jason. Also,
thank you.
PJ or Tricia had mentioned Black Mirror, which is kind of a huge, kind of new influence for me. When I'm teaching a college rhetoric class or intro to lit, my icebreaker is I assign the class has to see season 2, episode 2, White Bear. And then it always springs discussion. So I was excited that she brought that up.
Yeah.
My book must be high on the funny meter, especially if I summarize it, because I suck at summarizing. And it's just, it's going to sound ridiculous. The summer link is, it's a guy stuck in his car, driving on a beautiful summer day on the highway. And if he ever leaves his car, he's everybody.
Yours was funnier. It did actually rank higher in funniness. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a little bit of a delay going on. I'm sorry about that, Jason.
No.
Yeah, but it's about a guy stuck in a shitty Nissan, stuck on the highway, beautiful summer day, but if he ever gets out of the car, he's everybody's nightmare. There's not much else I can really say about it. His own morals keep him in his own hell, where time doesn't mean anything and he's forever on the highway on this lazy day.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much. And yeah, I think I have some latency going on. So I'm turning off my video, not because I don't want you guys to see Charlie McCarthy behind me, but because I'm hoping it'll keep me from freezing up on you. Michael, it is really lovely, actually. So David Geister, it's so funny. We only met this year, but I knew that I wanted to ask you to submit something, and what you submitted was just a very thoughtful story. Tell us a little bit about the window.
The window. Well, I should explain that I'm a huge fan of Thomas Tryon's The Other, and Stephen King's Salem's Lot. Straub's Ghost Story, anything that deals with mechanics in towns and small towns. Mm-hmm. But having said that, the Other in part is inspired by what happened to me over probably, a couple weekends when I was a little kid, a little shaver back about 1970. So I would have been about 6 years old at an aunt and uncle's farm, and there with my siblings and my cousins. And it's rather ironic. It's 1970, so the Vietnam War is going full tilt. But as little kids, we're playing in the fields. We're playing army. And 1 minute we're fighting, rebels. And the next minute we're fighting Germans. And the next minute we're fighting dinosaurs. Because, when you're a kid, they all exist in that same world. And so part of the story is heavily nostalgic. In fact, I just reread it this morning and thought, good God, was this just a therapy session for me? But in part, the story was inspired by a nightmare I had that summer, and it had to do with me being in the bathroom at, I don't want to give too much away, at my aunt and uncle's place, and everybody in the other room is just fine, and there's something going wrong in that bathroom, and nobody can hear me, and I can feel something, going for me. So the story is a mix of all those things, and then there's a mechanical tin drummer that my aunt had on her shelf. She had a pair of them, And I love those things because I was always a history kid. I still am. And so that all in my imagination got jumbled into the window.
That's a really good tease, David. I'm going to have to read that story now.
Oh.
I'm like, oh, what's happened? I've got to know.
Oh, dear. Well, and there's not to give anything away again, but I mentioned the cowboys and the soldiers and dinosaurs, and this is the same summer that my Aunt Bonnie had taken me to the drive-in theater to see Ray Harryhausen's magnificent animation in the Valley of Gwangi.
Yes.
And you do have cowboys and dinosaurs, and so that's where, I'm not kidding, so much of that stuff is really from my childhood. You'll probably be able to figure out what part I embellished. Trust me.
It's very sweetly written. It really has a genuine sort of, what I think of that sort of that king-like American sweetness. I think Straub is a good way to go, but it's sweeter than Straub.
Yeah, it's sweeter than Straub. Thank you.
Yeah. So Sam Knight or James Sams, but Sam Knight. Here's what I have written in my notes, because again, I use a spreadsheet so that I can like move the stories around and fit them into place. And yours said, teen team up, gay teen lizard people camping. And so your story is called Lounging with the Lizardmen. Tell us a little bit about this.
You realize by ranking our stories in orders of humor, you're eventually going to have to give each one of us an actual number, so we'll leave you alone, right?
Well, I think it's a good sign that he sounded like he was genuinely laughing as he was describing it. So I think probably yours.
Well, it's actually, I mean, I can't even remember the ranking of this one, but it has more humor than not.
In volume 2, I did a wintry story, and it was a cold story, and it was a pretty dark story.
Yes.
And this, I kind of went as opposite as I could go and still stay horror. Obviously, I went with the summer theme, but instead of being, cold, I went hot and sweltery and oppressive, and I wanted it to be a little bit lighter. So I wanted you to know right off the bat with the title, Lounging with the Lizardmen, that it was going to be a little bit lighter. So even when you get started in the story and it's oppressive and something bad looks like it's happening, I wanted you to know it's not going to be that bad. Go ahead and enjoy it for the vacation it's supposed to be. So that's kind of how that happened. It really was me trying to balance out the first story, which,
which is super dark. Yes, it was.
It is. It's got a very dark ending, and I don't usually end darkly. So I felt like I needed to balance that out in my writing. So there's another story now that exists that balances out the darker one.
Excellent. Lovely, lovely. Thank you very much. Let's see. Alethea, and you and I have not actually spoken before. We've only met by email, but Blood, Sweat, and Tears was your story, and yours is the only story about a writer. So that was actually super fun. So
even ping points.
Yes, exactly. All right, tell me about it. Tell me about Blood, Sweat, and Tears, which is also a swell band, by the way. But go ahead.
Awesome. I'll look them up.
Yeah, I was afraid of that. Okay.
She just aged about half of us, I think, on this.
I was going to say, you really dated yourself at that point.
Yep.
So, Blood, Sweat, and Tears is about a Greek woman who becomes a ghostwriter for this celebrity author, and she writes her best-selling novel using an old Greek sort of spell/curse using blood, sweat, and tears. Because I come from a Greek family who, is afraid of cursing anything. You tell the baby she's pretty, you've cursed the baby.
Interesting.
There are curses everywhere, and everybody does curses all the time. So you just have to use your power wisely. And I guess a lot of the story was based on that.
Lovely. It was really cool, and it had this sort of inside baseball sort of feel to it. I mean, admittedly, it didn't go too deep so that you wouldn't like alienate the reader, but it was really kind of neat just to hear just all this whining about putting a book together and the schedules and so forth. So that was really cool. So thank you, Monsieur Wolle. At last count, actually, the funny thing is, last but not least, Monsieur Wolle, at last count, here's the Campfire Story. So tell me about it.
It is. So I guess it's sort of your more straightforward summer camp horror ghost story type of thing. Based at a fictional Central Texas camp, but inspired by an actual camp that I went to when I was a kid and that I worked at as a counselor one summer when I was in college. So, you know, every camp sort of has their own ghost story or mythological boogeyman, whatever. So this is just kind of an exploration of what might be going on out at this crazy place. And those poor kids, I tell you.
I love the inside baseball on like just what it is to be a counselor and the favorites, the favorite kids that you have and the ones that you're like, I can't believe I have to deal with this kid and all that. That was really cool.
For sure. Thank you.
Oh,
I should say that we have to, you need to talk to us about yours.
Oh, yeah, right? No, I guess so. What is my story even called?
Well, before Jason starts, I just want to say that I'm really happy that we had a camp story in our summer anthology. It's a kind of needed one.
You're right. Yeah, no, good. That's a
wonderful.
Excellent,
thank you.
Excellent point. Yeah, you know, and you know, it's funny because Intru and I actually were in the Boy Scouts together a long time ago, and so we were on multiple like campouts and like in the woods at like Mother Neff Park and other parks, you know, in Central Texas, and
it was snipe hunting, if I remember correctly.
Jesus Christ, I can't. You're talking about like about 1984 or so forth, you know, well before Mary was born. So the
yeah, when Blood, Sweat, and Tears was actually a band that people knew.
Yeah, like 10 years out.
Oh my God, that's funny. Okay, so my story is All I Do Is Dream of You, and it's actually a time travel story. You know, it's funny, Trisha, you mentioned Black Mirror, so there's a similarity there. In this case, it was very Twilight Zone-y. You have a gay dancer who gets fired from his job because the producer of the show that he's on, which is a musical show like Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, gets canceled because the producer is in a big Me Too scandal. And so the guy, and there aren't enough jobs for dancers, and so he's like, I wish I could go back to the 50s. And it's about this sort of loop of time traveling that this guy gets locked into because every past that he goes to doesn't solve the problems that he's hoping that they'll solve. And I got to include just some stuff, more stuff from Laguna Beach that didn't even make it into the Bookman, which is the recent book I did that takes place in Laguna Beach. So I used some landmarks from Laguna there. So yeah, it's a gay time travel story. That's very kind of you to ask, Drew. So yeah, so we should open up for questions, because I know we've been talking for like half an hour, but a lot of people have been waiting patiently. So I'm dying to know if there are any questions, and I don't even know how exactly to do it. I mean, somebody could could ask a question in chat, for instance, and actually David just said, what about Interest Story? Well, we started with Interest Story. Yeah. That was the Rising, the one with the flood. But it's a super solid question. I have so first of all, Julia, did you have any question? I mean, I wanted to ask Mr. Nisbet why he picked the 60s, but I had some more general questions as well. And if there's anybody in the audience who wanted to ask something, that'd be great.
Well, yeah. Well, why don't you go ahead and get your question about the 60s answered, and then I'll chime in.
Yeah. So Rob, one thing I thought was really wild is you placed your story like in, you know, what I'd call the Kennedy era, you know, and why? Like, what moved you to put this story of the Scottish countryside in that era?
Okay. I still don't know if you can see me, but that doesn't matter. Right. I wanted the artist in the story to be really isolated. He was in the middle of nowhere, on the Scottish coast, miles from anywhere, and I didn't want him to have any help at all. He had to be totally on his own.
Yeah.
So he's setting it in the 60s. There's no internet. He hasn't got a mobile phone. He's just trapped. It's just himself with these wasps, and he can't escape. The nearest town is like 10 miles away. So he's got the land agent who comes and brings his provisions for him in this cottage. But that's his only link with the outside world. And then once the land agent is attacked, without giving too much away, then he is totally alone. And that's what I wanted. So that's why it was set in the 60s. So he couldn't get any help.
That's fabulous. That's really fabulous. Thank you. Thank you very much. That makes sense. And it reminds us when we're putting together a story that you can always choose, you can always choose the past because it'll help you, I don't know, avoid some of these annoying things like cell phones and what have you.
Yes.
So is anybody that wrote a story, is this their first time writing a short story? Or is everybody, David's raising his hand. Are you saying?
Oh, I can see me now.
Yeah, we can see Rob.
Definitely my first time out. I'm a novice. Yeah.
So how was the experience and how is it different from what you've done in the past?
Well, I'm a visual artist, so I spend most of my time, painting or sculpting or whatnot. But man, that writing was a heady experience, very addictive, and I enjoyed it so much that I immediately started a second story, which may or may not go anywhere. But it was just what I needed at this point in time. I needed a change from what I traditionally would do, and I once I started writing, I couldn't stop. I'd be up till 3 or 4 or 5 some mornings, writing and rewriting. And then my dear wife would hear this. Can I borrow you for just a moment? I just want, and she'd hear this over and over again. Yeah, do you have a minute? So yeah, it was, and I'm sure some of you know what that's like. But so thanks for asking. It was most enjoyable. So I might be a one-trick pony, who knows? But I really enjoyed it.
Well, traditionally you've been a painter, isn't that right? I mean, you've done a number of children's books and so
right.
forth.
I'm a picture book illustrator and a history painter, and sometimes sculptor, but also in my heart a monster kid. So this dovetailed so nicely with the podcast that I do with Mary and Scott. We're monster kids, and this was a chance to play with something I've been in love with since my earliest memories. Those black and white Universal movies on, Creature Feature or Horror Incorporated on Saturday nights. So
very cool.
Yeah, thanks for asking.
And I know David's story was based on a real experience. Anybody else's stories based on, or at least inspired by a real life experience? Wants to jump in?
Well, I would say mine again is based on or inspired by an actual real summer camp.
Right.
And this camp did have, its story of, the scary thing that was out there haunting the camp. It's not exactly what made it into my story, but it's kind of, there's some similarities. It was sort of an origin for my story.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Anybody else first time writing a story, or are you guys all short story?
A lot of these guys, I've occasionally, in every one of the collections, we've had somebody who's like never taken on short stories before. Like they'll be a screenwriter or a visual artist or something. So, but a lot of these guys have written way more stories than than I
So
have.
who prefers short stories to novels writing? That is. Anybody prefer? You do?
I do.
Why?
Yes.
I think Michael was first. What is your?
No, she can go.
Bonnie, what?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Prefer
Why?
short stories to novels. Well, I guess it's the amount of time.
Really?
Yeah. So, you work on a novel and you're working on it, and maybe you're a really fast writer and you finish it in, let's see, 3 months, or you're a really slow writer and you finish it in like a year or 2 years, and then maybe you know, if you have an agent, maybe they're able to sell it and maybe they're not, but you really just like don't know unless you're, you know, very well established. Whereas with the short story, you know, I can write a short story in a week and then I can send it out and then it'll either, you know, come back to me or it'll get published, but it doesn't feel like, you know, I'm spending so much of my time on it. And so I prefer short stories for that reason alone. Like I enjoy writing both of them, but I think that it's easier to get that that positive feedback going.
Excellent.
With a short story.
Michael, is that pretty much what you think too, or do you have a different take?
Yeah, the time thing is a real consideration because, you know, I don't know, 3 months, 8 months, 2 years. What if you have 111,000 words and you realize it sucks?
Yeah.
And if you're doing a short story, you pretty much are going A to B to C. It's going to be under 10,000 words, and you're going to know pretty soon. It's more like a month, you know, depending on the way you do it. So I see exactly what Bonnie was saying. For me, just aesthetically, it's harder to keep the hallway scary for 325 pages without going into multiple flashbacks and multiple viewpoints, which supposedly is what editors hate and what I always fall into. And I just feel much more comfortable doing a short story. I get it, and then it's done.
There's also this weird thing about short stories where a short story has a tone much more than even a novel does. A novel has to be a novel and tell it, where a short story can be almost a tone poem, even if it's 10,000 words long, and you'll sustain that mood. And somebody can read it probably in a sitting, even if it's a long one like that. And so it'll have that as though you're writing a piece of music. And that's cool because it means that this week, like Bonnie was saying, you can work on one that's sort of wistful and poetic and Ray Bradbury-esque. And next week it can be, you know, hard driving or funny or whatever. So, yeah. There was another question actually that I'm looking here. So I'm curious. I reached out. There's a question from Kyle. So I'm gonna go to his question first because mine was just my curiosity. So Kyle says, how do you organize stories based on humor? Do you tend to ramp up consistently throughout the volume or alternate between more and less humorous stories for the sake of impact? Thank you for asking. All right. I know it's absurd to rank horror stories by humor. The reason why I do that is the spreadsheet says author, title, notes, which means the major keywords, and then ranking by humor, which I could also just say ranking by darkness. And so what I'll try to do is you'll start with kind of a dark one, and then a light one and a dark one. So you alternate. And the other thing is, since I have those keywords, I'm also, so basically you don't want it to get consistently funnier as you go. So you want to constantly keep it more or less alternating. And likewise, if there's like 2 science fiction stories, I'll separate them. If there's 2 with time travel, I'll separate them, so that you don't feel like you've gotten into a solid groove of a particular kind of story. Likewise, length, you know, so you won't have 2 10,000-word stories in a row.
So do you regret having said anything about ranking by humor?
No, actually, I feel like I feel like I've come across. I feel like everybody's response to it indicates to me that I'm onto something.
Awesome.
That there's that we're getting somewhere.
Well, my question before about short stories versus novels, I noticed that Leanna. So is it Leanna or Renee? You're muted. You're muted. There you go.
I use both Leanna and Renee. So my first name is Leanna, and I use the Renee because I had a really powerful experience with a psychic when I first got my first book contract, and I was debating about whether to use my middle name or not. And I basically walked in the room, and this lady pointed at me, and she goes, "Use all 3 names." And I was like, "Okay, this girl." Want me to
Okay,
use all three
so
names?
first of all, I'm going to read your comment, and then I want you to tell me more about the psychic. So Leanna Renee says that the pesky tech thing is why she usually writes in the 19th century, and she's a novelist who tinkers at short stories and then runs away. So it sounds like you prefer the novel format. Is that what I'm understanding?
Correct.
Okay, so you can talk about that, but I also want to hear more about psychic.
Well, I am an actor by profession. I went to theater school with kind of a minor and a background in writing, but theater and acting and performance was my first, professional venture. So all of my work is very, very character driven, which is fine for a short story, but I tend to really love to build out whole family sagas over the course of, in my case, several series where I have intersecting characters that go from one series to the next. And so for me, that long range family drama is what I can really sink my teeth into and dive in. And so for me, as a character driven atmospheric novelist, I really just want to luxuriate in that for a long time. My short stories are short and just one high concept idea, and then that's about all I have. And I don't tend to have those bursts of that one high concept idea very often. So when I do, I will work with that, but I tend to have the multi-layered mystery to solve that tends to lend itself much more to a novel writing voice. And
Very cool.
all of my work deals with psychics, and so I have had paranormal experiences. One of my other jobs is I'm also a ghost tour guide in Manhattan. Not right now because of the pandemic, but I am a ghost tour guide. And so every aspect of my performance and my writing life is tied to the spirit world and to psychic phenomena. And so, involving that, just the idea of that informing my life and my writing, it's sort of, I guess you could call me a method writer. I always say, if you like my clothes, you'll like my books. I dress like I write. I'm a goth. I love, spooky stuff. So it's really kind of, I have Edgar Allan Poe around my neck. I'm such a trope. So, I really awesome. Just kind of, it's a whole seamless thing, I guess.
So you live in Manhattan still, or on Manhattan still?
I'm in the outer boroughs.
Okay.
I am in the outer. Manhattan's a little pricey, but
sure.
But yeah, so I'm in New York City and I love it.
All right, we'll make sure and come and see your tour when everything is
all
running.
All the ghosts
again.
are like unsupervised right now.
All the ghosts are
super sad.
They're running rampant everywhere.
You can totally tell why Leanna and I became instant best friends. Like within 5 minutes, we were total.
Fantastic. No, we met a woman who, I'm forgetting her name, in Glastonbury, England, who was a witch who ran, we met her because we went into her shop, and she ran a bed and breakfast that was witch themed as well.
Witchcraft themed, yeah.
Witchcraft themed. It was the coolest. She's just like the coolest person I've ever met, and I just want to go back and just like kind of wander around.
We have to dig her up. That's
interesting.
She was cool, and she has kind of adopted us. That was super sweet. Yes. So I was curious. I reached out to everybody and said, hey, I'd like you to do a summer story, and I left that completely sort of undefined. Like, I don't know, what do you think it means? And so I'm just curious, if anybody wants to talk about, Mr. Nisbet did talk about this process. He said, I was thinking, like, what does it mean? What's a horror story? And then I thought, wasps. But how did the rest of you, does anybody want to share how you approached the question of what is a summer story?
I can start with that. There's two sides of summer, right? There's the part we really look forward to, and then there's the part that once we get there, we don't like so much, which, that's like all of it, right? It's like we really look forward to Christmas, but then when we get there, there's family that we don't like so much. And that's kind of what I went with this. When you said summer, I was like, well, what does summer mean to people? And then I thought, well, this is supposed to be a horror story, right?
Yeah.
So which parts of summer do I not like? And instantly the times that I had spent in the Carolinas where it was so hot I couldn't breathe and I just wanted to die, but it was too hot to even die, I was like, that's where I'm going to start right there.
Yeah, yeah, if you can really evoke that feeling of the stickiness and the heat and just that oppressiveness, that's pretty great. Yeah, I liked that a lot. I have lost the chat box. So Joya, I can't read it. Are there any?
I have the chat box, but there's no new questions. Leanna Renee says it sounds like her kind of lady, which I'm assuming is our awesome witch friend.
She was.
She told us about how both Johnny Depp and Nicolas Cage had houses nearby, and that Nicolas Cage was a poser who pretended to be into black magic, but he was actually not at all, and he was just a dork.
Yeah, apparently he would walk around Glastonbury like with a big black hat, you know, like staring at people and stuff. And
poser, but and then he and Johnny hang out together because Johnny Depp had a house in Bath. Anyway, that's just random. So no new questions. If anybody has a question you want to ask, go for it. I'm wondering if any of these authors have a favorite horror short story that they have that like, you know, been inspired by or just have kind of loved. I see pensive faces, but no.
No, I do. Father, Son, Holy Rabbit by Stephen Graham Jones.
What's that about?
It's about a father and a son who are lost out in the wilderness in the snow. And the dad has to figure out how to feed his son so they don't starve to death. Story.
By Graham Jones, yeah.
It's
interesting.
Basically everything Shirley Jackson has ever done.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. That's for me. I think I would choose The Lonesome Place by August Derleth. It's just a tone poem about this particular, like, you know, this particular corner near a factory that just feels like it's sort of missing a soul, and it's just a wonderful story by Derleth, who, you know, is known as being sort of a compiler of Lovecraft, but was really an excellent writer of his own. And by the way, it's in this book, which I got in the 70s and is the thing that inspired me to want to write horror. So I've been reading horror anthologies since I was a kid.
Excellent.
Could I say, I honestly can't pick any one story. There are just so many. I'm a dyed-in-the-wool Stephen King fan, which means I like cheeseburgers and, you know, whatnot. But
heck yeah.
But in terms of short stories, just about anything by Ramsey Campbell works for me, and that is it's either a result of or in spite of the fact that half the times I don't know what I've just read.
Yeah.
I think I must be extremely dense, but he's the master of ambiguity in some ways, and that to me is where some of the real horror lies, because I have to fill in a lot of those blanks. So yeah, if I want to have my mind work overtime for a little bit, I'll read some Ramsey Campbell short stories.
Excellent.
Kelly Link has some great horror short stories that have, she's got like this kind of zany sense of humor too. And so some of her stories are scary, but they're also funny. And then she has some that are just eerie. And it's kind of similar, like by the end of it, you're like, I don't actually know what happened. Right. There's this one, I think it's called Stone Animals or Stone Rabbits or something. And it's about this family that moves out to this new house, and they start seeing all these rabbits in the yard, and things just, the wallpaper is haunted. And
oh, wow.
The woman just keeps painting over it, but then she says, you know, that color is haunted. And you kind of don't know, like, is she losing her mind or?
How interesting.
The wallpaper actually haunted.
Sounds like the yellow
wallpaper. Also, yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Right. I'm pointing as though you can see me pointing at your little box on the screen.
Chat, yeah.
Nevertheless, yes, that's such a tip to like Charlotte Perkins Gilman. Is that right? Did I say that right?
Yes.
The yellow wallpaper. Yeah.
Iconic.
which is also a killer.
I'm looking at the chat, by the way, and I noticed that Mary says she's been to Nicolas Cage's prospective final resting place. Does he have a tomb already?
Yeah, I paid it's $20 to go see it.
That's fantastic.
Oh my gosh.
It's in Lafayette.
$20 I ever spent.
That is really funny.
This big white pyramid in the middle of Lafayette Cemetery. It's so weird.
That's fantastic. Oh my gosh.
Wow, that is really wild.
Mary's planning on taking the Monster Movie Happy Hour crew to New Orleans as soon as the quarantine is lifted, or as soon as the social distancing is lifted safely, and that'll have to be one of the spots we visit. That and a vampire bar or two.
To swell idea.
Well, we went to the ghost tour in New Orleans. That was fun, but we haven't been done the Manhattan one yet. Let's see. I've got Leanna Renee says King's Night Shift anthology was a huge influence on me.
Why is that, Leanna?
Yeah.
Well, I think because one of my favorite things about Stephen King is that he's really good with those short, high concept ideas. So whether it's like, okay, well, we're going to have a short story about the Mangler, this, horrible piece of machinery. Okay, we're going to have, I tend to really love King in short scale. I tend to not like his novels nearly as much as his short stories. So, because I feel sometimes some of his novels will lose their way a little bit, but the short stories have that high impact, high concept idea. And the paperback edition I had, do you guys remember the one with the hand that had all the eyeballs on it for Night
Yes,
Shift?
sure. Absolutely. Yeah.
It's like ingrained in my mind. So yeah,
beautiful.
when I read The Mangler, I was like, I was a kid, and I was reading it in my grandparents' basement, and the heater kicked on and made this horrible grinding noise, and I don't feel like my heart has never returned.
You've
to
never
normal.
recovered.
No, I have palpitations ever since.
Well, I'm with Michael about Skeleton Crew. I love the Skeleton Crew. Survivor type. Yeah, those are great stories. And then we talked about the Yellow Wallpaper and He by Lovecraft. Mary, what's He by Lovecraft?
He is a story that is about a man who moves to New York to try and live this sort of poetic artist's lifestyle, and finds only modernization, all the things that Lovecraft hates. So to try and get a feel of old New York, he would go walking at night, and he would go walking through this network of sort of arcane alleyways that would lead to other arcane alleyways. And one night meets a man who says, well, if you want to know these alleyways better, I'll show you. And winds up in his house, which ends up being in a different time than he started in. So I won't leave. I mean, that gives you a pretty good feel of what it is. The language, I mean, like anything Lovecraft, is just like, it's like eating a full meal, reading it. And this one is just exquisite. As someone, I love walking at night, so this one really resonated with me.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. Just have to check that one out for sure.
Can I add in something on that story?
Go crazy.
So on my haunted walking tours, I take crowds to the place on Perry Street in Manhattan where the courtyard is, where when he comes up out of that horrific dream, it's in that he was inspired by this courtyard on Perry Street in Greenwich Village.
That is
so
so
when
cool.
I was asked, it's such a crazy, weird place because you don't really have spaces like that much in Manhattan where it's this gated courtyard. It's sort of a remnant of old architecture, that was before the grid plan went in Manhattan. So it's this sort of like captured old world moment there, and it is actually quite creepy. So when I was asked to write a Lovecraft inspired story, I set my story as a tour guide who finds a diary right outside the place where he wrote He. And so it's a sort of an unreliable thing of me taking on from Lovecraft about He being the moment when the old ones really make contact through Lovecraft, looking for a way into the world. They tried with Poe, and Poe was too good of a spirit. They didn't really find their way in, but they did. Craft.
You know, our dogs are named Poe and Shelley after.
Oh,
beautiful.
Yes. Yeah.
Hey, Mary,
You probably heard them a few minutes ago.
Yeah,
they've take a road trip to New York now.
Yeah, now we gotta go. I have a brother at Cedar Sinai, so I've got so many reasons, but I would come mostly for your tour, Leanna, Renee.
Please do.
Yep. Road trip to New York, and then if anybody wants to come out to Colorado, we'll take you to the Stanley Hotel, and we can all do the tour there.
Yes. Can we do it in the winter? No.
Yeah.
Oh.
No, you totally can.
Sure. They don't. Yeah. Actually, they do. What are the roads that get closed off? You can't go up to the Continental Divide.
No, you can go to Stanley. Yeah, absolutely.
You can get to the Stanley. Yes.
It's a deal. Yeah. Be careful what you say. You're going to have a lot of people knocking on your door.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Gosh. So what? I'm trying to think. There was something else that I was going to ask, but
well, Michael's another story that Michael suggested was I know what you need. Who's that by?
Who's that by?
You're muted.
Yeah, that's Stephen King. That's in Night Shift.
Okay.
Yeah, there are a lot of good stories in that. That was
many.
My first horror book that I liked.
Did Night Shift? I'm sure a lot of people. For me, Stephen King, because I learned so much reading him. And also reading his book on writing, which is called On Writing. But Full Dark No Stars, which is the one about the guy who murders his wife and throws her in a well, and that's not the end of the story. It's terrifying. And apparently there's a movie. I haven't seen it. I look forward to being disappointed by every movie version of Stephen King. Like just this thing. I have to watch every one of them. It doesn't bother me in the slightest that it never works out. So,
is that kind of like eating a White Castle every time, you know?
Exactly. Well, I feel that way about, like, I swear to God, Patricia Cornwell is one of my favorite authors, and I honestly look forward to being disappointed by every single one of the Kay Scarpetta novels. Because, and the moment she writes another one, I will rush out and give her my $20. It is absolutely, which means possibly that enjoyment doesn't mean what we think it means. It's very possible that somehow that experience has a value all its own, even if you're constantly going, I don't know, there's something imperfect about this work. Okay. I know we're running short on time, but I'd just love to know if anybody has any other questions or anything else, because this has been a very interesting experiment in a book panel of 14 people, which you would never do at a conference. So yeah, any comments, questions, polling of your neighbors, anything that you would like?
Thanks for the opportunity, Jason.
Oh, of course. Absolutely. No, I really dug it. All right. Well, then, in that case...
Can I just say something?
Yes.
This is Alicia. I'm a friend of David Geister's. And I just want to say, I thought this was so awesome that I got to see every person who wrote a story in this book. So now I can connect. And when I read it, I'll, be able to think, oh, this was this person and this was this person. So I thought this was really cool. And I'm glad I was invited. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
That's one of the neat things about this. Sorry, yeah, how funny they are. That's one of the neat things about this COVID time is that so many of the meetings are like able to incorporate people from all over, and you're able to see people. And I think that's kind of neat. I think there's a lot of things that are going to stick around after all this is over that worked out really well.
And it was cool that now there's backstory to the story. So I'm like,
exactly.
Oh yeah, it's gonna be really neat. So I'm excited to read all the stories. Thank you.
Well, like Insher was saying, of course you can buy the new Castle of Horror Anthology Volume 3 went on sale today. Oh, I mean, you could pre-order before, but it is available today in Kindle. It's also available in paperback.
One right there.
Some of y'all have a paperback. Yes, right there.
Available in England.
There's another one. I don't even have one.
I don't have mine yet either. So I need to make that happen. But tomorrow we'll be running a deal where you can get Volume 1 for free. So I encourage you to tell your friends to go get Volume 1 for free and pick up Volume 2 for for $2.99, I believe it is on Kindle. My story in volume 1 actually was totally based in reality. It's about a middle-aged writer who goes to a farm to get some writing done, and everything goes poorly. So
I like that story a lot.
Thank you.
I really do. It's like, yeah, that's.
Thank you. I want to expand that one.
And
thank
don't
you,
forget,
everybody.
we've got volume 4 coming.
Oh
soon.
yeah, volume 4.
Can you tell us about that?
Volume 4 does not have a cover yet, so there's nothing I can show. But right now, it is called Women Running from Houses. The concept is gothic horror and gothic romance. And if that means anything to you, I can see that Leanna Renee is super duper excited. And Mary is like dabbing her eyes. She's so excited.
I can't even express to you. This is like, I wrote, when I was in middle school, I wrote a series of short stories that for like my friends and I self-published a magazine, and they're like, do you want to write a short story? And so I did like a 10-part series that upon rereading was like gothic romance. So this has been like baked into me, and 10-year-old Mary would be like, yes.
Well, isn't there a call? Isn't there a call for stories, Jason, or is that?
Yeah, there's a call for stories. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
So Mary, you don't have to be 10. You can do it now.
Yeah. If anybody wants to
I'm
know
pretty
about
damn
that,
close to 10, so.
contact me and I'll send you the call for stories. It's out there on some of the sites. So yeah, and I am super stoked about that. I haven't written my story yet. I have no idea what it's actually going to be, but I've told people whatever gothic romance and gothic horror makes you think of in a short story, try to come up with that. I can't I'm curious about this because all of the covers you've done so far have been very sort of iconic. How the heck are you going to do, like, what is the Castle of Horror anthology variation on women running from houses?
I haven't decided yet.
I mean, there's like hundreds,
go
thousands.
really traditional and have this
Yeah.
big flowing woman with a dress, or something more modern. So I'm still trying to figure it out. But there are rules. There are rules for what a cover with a woman running on it has to look like. There are certain things it has to contain. So we have to make sure we contain all of this.
Ooh, now I want to know.
Well, and the question is, it's possible you could even iconography. I'm going to make up a new word. You could create an iconic version of that somehow suggests woman running from house without actually, I don't know.
Well,
Who knows?
it has to, all the books kind of, even though the covers are different, they're all kind of similar to each other. So
Yes.
it kind of has to fit with, with everything else that we've done. I can't go completely avant-garde with this one. So it's gonna be similar to the other covers, but it's gonna be its own thing.
I have great faith in
I'm really curious as to how many in number of a woman running from a house or a castle or something like that. How many illustrations there are like that?
Hundreds. Charles Rutledge has
Oh,
a
yeah.
collection of them.
Yep.
He's
Yep.
been collecting them and putting them online. So if you look up the horror writer Charles Rutledge, he has a lot of collections that he calls his women running from houses books. So
Hey,
Yeah. I mean, and there's a
write that down.
website.
I need to see that.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, David. I'm sorry. There's a website from a couple, and they haven't updated it in like 7 years, which makes me super sad. But there was this blog called Women Running from Houses, and I used to read this woman's blog because she just reviewed gothic horror and gothic romance every week, and it was gorgeous. But it gave you a good idea of what the heck that was. But yeah, there's Pinterest. Rutledge has it. There's Pinterest lists of like just thousands and thousands of women running from houses. So, yeah, clearly we have to homage that. But what the heck it's going to be, God only knows.
There's a couple of suggestions in chat that we have you running from a house, Jason.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, nobody wants to see.
Can that be an alternate cover, like a special edition cover?
Yeah, we'll send it out to all the contributors, right?
Yeah, exactly.
When Incher turned 30, we made this series of photographs for him, where I went to all the places we went as kids, and you know, just being outside. This is what that makes me think of, is like, I went to like the footbridge over the creek that we used to play on, and of course it was gone. And like the you know, the movie house that we would go to, and of course it was closed and covered in weeds. It was just me standing in front of every decrepit place we had gone as children. But the thing is, me as this tiny little image in front of something, it played for laughs in that. And by the way, that's nearly 20 years ago now. That's the hilarious thing, is that was like, Jesus, I know, yeah.
I still have that book.
So, oh gosh. All right. Well, guys, thank you so much for your patience and for your time and for writing and for sharing with us. I am so thankful, and I really I can't wait to work with you all again. For those of you
Thanks
who came and
everybody
listened,
listening in. Yeah.
thank you so much. It means so much to us, and we appreciate your questions and your participation. Bye, everybody. Have a fantastic evening. I will talk to you soon. Bye.